Alright, so I'm going to show you guys the basics of Tinkercad. Here I have a model that we just created for the CNC router. Students actually helped create the bottom part of this, and then I just modified it with a couple little extra details. And I'm going to show you guys how to get started in Tinkercad so that you can do something very similar to this in the future. So let me see if I can get these buttons here. Move my head over a little bit. So when you go into Tinkercad and you create an account, you'll see on the side here, on this dashboard, if you will, you have a place for 3D designs, you have a place for electrical circuits, and there's some other options there as well. These are the main two that I'm using in my classes. If we go to 3D designs, and we want to create a new design, you can sort of start making all kinds of interesting things. If we scroll down here for a second, you can see some of the other fittings that we've done for different machines, different attachments. Some of these things would cost hundreds of dollars to make or to purchase, but we can make them with a 3D printer relatively cheap, cost effective. It's a long time to print them, and some of them are kind of big, so you need a fairly large 3D printer, which we have a pretty big one. It's not huge, but it's pretty big by comparison to like your home models. All right, so we're going to create a new design. We go in here, and this is our building platform here, our work plane, where we can create stuff. If you want to operate in metric, it's already set up to operate in metric for you. If you want to change that, you can go down here and edit your grid, and you can change that to an inch option if you want to do things in inches. I think it's a good idea to also change the width and length of your printing or your work plane. Our printers actually go larger than 8x8. But for most of the stuff, I like to put 8x8 in here just because it gives us a relatively small but also even build platform. And when I update that grid, it's going to change these boxes to 1 inch by 1 inch all the way across there and along the length as well. So now when I bring a box in and I place it, it's going to automatically be 1 inch by 1 inch. Length, width, and even the height as well is going to be 1 inch. So there's a bunch of options here with the box. I can change some different things. I can adjust the length of it here. I don't necessarily recommend doing it that way. I think it's much easier to just grab the object and try to set it as close to 1 as you want. Or you can actually use your tab and you can type 1 in there. So if I just press the tab key, and I tab over to my different measurements, I can adjust them just by typing in the numbers that I want. It's one way of doing it. Something else that you can do is down here at the bottom, like where we edited our grid, we can adjust our snaps. So this means when we move a block left to right or up to down, or we resize it, we can resize it by the 1/4 inch, by the 1/8 inch, 16th, all the way to 64th of an inch, which is pretty specific. I typically work between an 1/8 and a 16th. Sometimes I have to flip back and forth between the two, but if you're doing something pretty basic, you can go to 1/4 inch, and then when you try to resize your shape, it will go every 1/4 inch for you. Because I messed with the length over here, it's sort of giving me a goofy number. So I'm going to start fresh. And there we go. Now we're going every 1/4 of an inch. So that's resizing every 1/4 of an inch. Now you notice I can change the width and I can change the length depending on how I move the mouse around. If I hold shift, it's going to maintain that square through that shape. It's not going to let it change. So we can maintain our shape by holding shift. Okay? For most of the stuff that we've done, we've actually been using the cylinder tool a lot more than the box. And there are other tools over here. If you just scroll down, you can do all kinds of really interesting things with different kind of more advanced shapes. You got a heart, tube, star, polygon. You can change the number of sides and make it really any shape that you want, hexagon, pentagon, whatever. Something that I sort of found out later as I was playing around in Tinkercad and learning how to use the different tools and stuff is that when you use a cylinder or a circle, anything that's got a rounded shape to it, it has a number of sides. So right now this is 20-sided. It's not really a true circle. If we zoom in on it, we can actually see that there's some flat spots there. And if we turn the number of sides up, they will slowly go away, but they don't go away completely. They just get a lot smaller and tighter together, which is going to make this look a lot better in our 3D print when we actually go ahead and create something that we print with. So this model, it turned out pretty well, but if you look closely, you can kind of see those flat spots. That's because they didn't add extra sides to it. Still a nice looking part, but it's got those flat spaces because they didn't make that cylinder as round as possible by adding sides to it. So that's just a neat little thing that you can do to make your shapes look a little bit more smooth. One of the biggest tools that you're going to use is align. So if I have these two shapes kind of catty corner here and I want to align them in the same direction, I can select one, hold shift, and select the second one. Now I click on this little align tool up here at the top, and I have these options. So depending on how I want to align those two objects, I can center them this way, and it gives you a preview of what it's going to look like. I can center them this way. It will give me a preview. If I wanted to put them right in the same spot, I would do both of these, and eventually they would end up right in the center here. I can also adjust them vertically up and down. I just want to align them this way along this axis. So now they are aligned there. As far as moving shapes around, you can just click and drag. If you align something and you don't want it to move freely, you can click on it and use your arrow keys to kind of just bump it over. So if I wanted it to be right there, for example, I can just bump it over with the arrow keys, and it will move every 1/4 of an inch because that's what we have our grid snaps set to. So now, let's say I wanted to do this sort of half-shaped thing here. I'm going to click on these two, and I can merge them together. And now they are one shape. And that is one of the most basic tools of using Tinkercad. I'm going to show you one other thing really quick that's very similar to that. So I'm going to undo, which you can Control Z if you want to. If I click on these shapes, I have an option to turn them into a hole or a solid. So if I take the cylinder and I click on hole, now when I merge them together, see what happens. I'm going to select the hole, shift, select the square, and that works for as many different shapes as you have. If you want to hold shift and grab all of them, or you can just draw a big box around everything that you want to do. Sometimes you want to hold shift and click so that you can get more specific things. I'm going to go ahead and click on group, and now I have this cutout in that shape. So still some very basic functions, but there's a lot of other cool things that you can do. I just wanted to show you the very basics to getting started. You can add shapes, cylinders to whatever you're doing and do some really interesting stuff. It's very important to pay attention to your dimensions, though, as you're resizing stuff. You can also rotate, which we'll talk more about in another video. And when you rotate something, it's important to keep in mind that your dimensions are not going to behave the same way as before. So if I move this here, I'm not really changing the size of the square as much as I'm changing the depth and the width of the object. So it's kind of weird how it resizes your shape. It's just not going to do it the same way as before when it was sitting flat. So now it's kind of a wonky size because we twisted it around and tried to manipulate it in a different orientation. Which, more on that on another video. So I hope this gets you guys started on Tinkercad. I hope you enjoy. I hope it wasn't too long for you. We'll go over some more of these tools later. So that was just aligning and grouping.